off, not almost off, right?
Yeah, almost off. That way we don't get any reverb. Now are we getting anything going across the transmitter?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, we're seeing
All right.
seeing stereo output.
Randall's in the stair.
What's it?
I said Randall's in the stair. So,
Step out. All right.
I haven't seen anybody check in, but we'll see if anybody checks in. We're doing live streaming.
All right, I just got a notification on my phone that you've gone live.
Well, that's good. Now,
I'm sure somebody will pop in.
oh, I'm sure before the night's over, people will be coming in. So if there's anybody out there now, give us a message on chat as to whether we're coming through. And
No.
we'll,
Now wait a minute. Now I see right here, Bob and Emily.
nothing's showing up here. We'll have to.
Oh wait a minute. Yeah, you're probably in the wrong window.
No,
It
I'm
should
in
be.
No, see, you're right there, old timer.
Oh, there they. Oh, I'm sorry. They're way down there. All right. Okay, Quirk. 5x5. All right. Emily, thank you. Cannabis, thank you. Bob, Quirk to you too. Okay. I will bring this up so I can see more of the chats. Like I say, folks, I may not be able to refer to the chats as much as Mike did, but I will try.
I've got it open on my phone here. I'll try that for a while too, if you want.
Comrades, the band is back together. Yay! I just passed your mountain about an hour ago. That's, yeah. Anyway. Hi, Jack. Okay. Well, folks, this is going to be our first run. We're planning on doing it every Sunday night from 6 to 8 until we get our feet underneath our deck. And we'll go from there. And don't expect the same chemistry between me and the guests that will be coming in, because Mike and I were together for 20-some years, and there was a real rare chemistry between the two of us, even when we were not on the air. We were at gun shows, okay? And so it may sound a little dry, but once we get going and these guys get to feel comfortable coming, and the guests feel comfortable in coming, we will maybe get to be a little better. Just all I can tell you is bear with us and spread the word that we're back. And there will be improvements made as we go, like getting some bumper music and figuring that out and that. So I want to do a couple things here because we have an election year coming up. I've been watching the Democrats, the Communist Party, blow their mouth about what they want to do. And let me find it here. One of them is, the first one I'm going after is good old Bernie Communist Sanders, who is actually, based on this last story that I found, is communist and Nazi rolled into one.
He's worse than we thought, isn't he?
Yeah, he's worse than we thought. Imagine the worst that you can have, like the Hurricane Dorian, and add him on there 10 times over. Okay.
It's usually it works out. Communism.
Bernie, when we're going through this, if you guys have any comments you want to make, go right ahead. Sander channels Scrooge. Decrease the surplus population. Okay? That headline alone should tell you that he wants to what do they call that when they want to exterminate a race? Not
genocide.
Not euthanasia, but
genocide.
He wants to genocide third world countries because of surplus population. Let me read you some of this, and you can think for yourselves here. Senator Bernie Sanders, a Democratic presidential hopeful, communist presidential hopeful, thinks the U.S. should fund efforts in third world countries to decrease the population. His comments were made Wednesday during a 7-hour CNN program featuring communist candidates talking about global warming. The question was from Martha Redoff, a Connecticut woman. Human population growth has more than doubled in the past 50 years, she said. Well, that's because we haven't had any major wars, don't you know?
Give it time.
Yeah. Especially when you got idiots like these that are trying to run the country. The planet cannot sustain this growth. I realize this is a poisonous topic for politicians, but it is a crucial to face. Empowering women and educating everyone on the need to curb population growth seems a reasonable campaign to enact. Would you be courageous enough to discuss this issue and make it a key feature of a plan to address climate catastrophe? Bad. Okay, what they're trying to do is they're trying to eliminate the population because it is leading the earth to a catastrophe. And so human beings are all, as you know, are always at fault. But anyway. Yes, replied Sanders. He then inserted a promotion for boarding, saying the answer has everything to do with the fact that women in the United States of America, by the way, have a right to control their own bodies and make reproductive decisions. Okay, this is where I disagree with abortion. And this is my personal. I'm not going to go into the whole detail because a lot of it gets to be boring, gobbledygook bullshit. But if you don't want to have kids, there's several ways to stop from having kids. Abortion is not.
That's not a good option.
If you don't want to have kids, keep your legs shut.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Have some responsibility, right?
If you don't want to have kids, go have your tubes tied. And the guy go have his.
Well, that's going a little far, isn't it, Daryl?
Well, it all depends on how far they have to go to get to it anyway. Yeah, okay, well, but, you know, and then the other thing, the other ways is there's plenty of contraceptives out there in the lines of foam, IUDs, birth control pills, the morning after something or other. And the same way with men, they have developed a birth control pill, and then the last resort is always the condom. Okay? So there is no reason to have an abortion mill anywhere if the people are educated and they don't want to have kids. To sit there and say, okay, it's okay to spread your legs when you're drunk or high on drugs, and then afterwards you find out you're pregnant, you go to an abortion mill and you have the baby removed. That's murder.
That's the truth. That's the truth. There's so many other ways. I mean, so many tools that can be employed before something as horrific as some of these abortions I'm hearing about, which include basically a child being born and then dispatched.
And if they claim education is the answer to all our problems, then why are they not educating these children in health class about the actual preventatives for pregnancy? Okay?
Oh, well that, or how about this? How about showing these kids videos of how horrific the procedure is of killing a defenseless human being after it's born?
Yeah.
I mean, apparently there's these children, and there's this legally now, isn't it okay to,
up in New York, it's okay to,
in Virginia,
I believe, there's a couple states that it's okay to abort a child after it has been born up to 5 hours or 5 days. I forget the timetable on it. But when they do that, you know how they do that? They put a probe through the kid's head, okay? Or they crush it. And,
I've heard of that being used for, yeah.
And personally, I feel that any doctor that does that kind of shit is committing a mortal sin. And of course, my opinion don't count for anything, but it's just common sense. If you believe in Christianity and or if you're a Christian, no, whether you believe in a God of any kind. I don't want to just single out Christians. If you believe in a God of any kind, I don't know of any except for maybe one that does promote the use of abortion or murder to control the population. And I won't mention who that one Muslim is, but okay.
Really, that's in the Muslim religion. It's the ability to do that.
Hey, they can. The husband can cheat on the wife. If the wife cheats on the man, she can be stoned to death.
Yeah.
If she is raped and doesn't put up a strong enough defense against the rape, she can be stoned to death. And all the husband has to do is hand her a letter saying he's going to divorce her and to walk out on her. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I don't want to sound like I'm picking on them, but that does not sound like the type of God or prophet that I want to follow. Okay. And if you're an infidel, in which they feel Christians are, if you don't convert, it's in their Quran to, if they don't convert, lop off their head. Okay. Which is a form of genocide. Okay.
Seems like that religion lacks a lot of moderation.
Yeah.
The kind of moderation that builds civilization, as I know it.
And this brings us back into a circle of the recent expeditions or expectations of several of the dictators of the last century, like Adolf Hitler, Stalin, Japanese, and then more recent in Vietnam, and Pol Pot in Cambodia, and who was that idiot in Uganda? Idi Amin. Okay, all committing genocide in their countries. And Hitler was bad. He killed 7 million, known of 7 million. But Stalin was our ally, so he wasn't as bad, even though he killed 50 million of his own people. And Pol Pot killed about 3 or 4 million down in Cambodia, and he was bad. Okay, the Chinese, or the Japanese, when they were in certain Chinese towns, liquidated 100,000 people before they surrendered or withdrawn. And so, this is nothing new, but Bernie Sanders is wanting to bring that back, but only he wants to bring it back in the form of abortion. And so, anyway, that's how I feel about that.
My solution to overpopulation is removing government programs that support illegitimate children.
That would help.
Because if you want more of something bad, just create a government program, and you'll get more of it.
The welfare state creates a money mill for the women with the birth of these children. Okay, because each time they have one, they get more money.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not uncommon to find women that are on welfare that have 9, 10, or so kids. But the part that always got me going back when Reagan was president, a lot of you probably don't know anything about this, or heard anything about it, but when he was pregnant, he was trying to cut welfare because he saw what it was doing. And they interviewed some black women, not African Americans, black women, because they're women, they're Americans. They're not from Africa. Their ancestors were, but they're not. They're right here, Americans. Well, I have 9 or 10 kids by as many different husbands, and I don't know who the father is, so I could go after him for child support. Okay? government will support them. I don't know what the fee is or how much each one of them gets. But they claim it takes $750 a month to raise a kid. So, even if the government's only paying half of that, you have 10 kids, you're getting $3,500 a month for doing what? Sitting on your ass doing nothing.
Well, you're a babysitter now.
Yeah.
You're hired by the state to babysit your own children.
Yeah.
And there's no
to make
father
sure
in the
you have
house.
job security, you go and pop out a few more.
I've seen it myself. I've
Yeah.
literally, I have people near me that have done this.
Yeah.
Nobody I'm related to, but.
Yeah. So.
But the thing is, you get more of it. You get fatherless households. I'm a big believer that the father needs to be in the, and you need a household with a father. Okay, and then the father has to know he has some expectations to lead the household properly.
Which I have that's a good segue into something that's been bothering me for years and something that's going on.
Well, it's time to get it out, Daryl. Let's hear it. Been bothering you for years. Let's get it all on the table.
Well, it's something that the people in this country are starting to accept the idea of socialism. Now, socialism is a political correct term for communism. And I happen to have here the 10 main planks of the Communist Manifesto on how to take over a country from within. And when I read you these 10, you tell me how many you think are going on in this country.
Sure.
Although Marx advocated the use of any means, especially including violent revolution, to bring about socialist dictatorship, he suggested 10 political goals for development of countries such as the United States. How far has the United States, traditionally the bastion of freedom, free markets, and private property, gone down the Marxist road to fulfill these socialist aims? You be the judge.
Hey, Daryl, I hate to interrupt you. I just saw Paraclete Jones has been so kind as to tell us that your sound is low. Sorry, folks. It looks like we're going to get into some technicals here real quick.
Okay, does that make it any better?
Here, excuse me. Let's check the levels here.
I'm not sure which is what.
We're going to go, we got to open up OBS.
OBS, right there.
Look at that. Look at that. Let's
Now how'd that get down? Does that make it any better?
Hey, folks, how we doing now?
Well, we gotta go back to chat.
Oh, no, I've got it here, too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Was that live dashboard? Yeah.
Okay, Paraclete Jones has thanked us for fixing the problem by the looks of it. Thanks for the heads up,
The mic was on. The problem with this mic is we can't turn it off. So what happened was the volume bar, for some reason or other, had been
I'll take responsibility for that because I was goofing around with it before the show.
Yeah.
And I thought we had it.
Okay. The following are Marx's 10 planks from his Communist Manifesto. Abolition of private property in land and application of all rents of land to public purpose. Courts have interpreted the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution in 1868 to give the government far more eminent domain powers than was originally intended under the Republic of Eminent Domain. The various zoning regulations, land use by the Bureau of Land Management, property taxes, and environmental excessive private property rights have become very diluted, and private property in lands, vehicles, and other forms are seized almost every day in this country under the forfeiture provision of the RICO statutes and the so-called war on drugs.
Oh, civil asset forfeiture.
Yeah, okay. And if you don't pay the property tax, the property's taken away from you. Okay?
Yeah.
And so, right there, you can see that going on. Look at the Bureau of Land Management, and there's a couple incidences with farmers out there in the Midwest.
Oh,
Well, they've been feeding cattle on the government land for years, hundreds of years, 100 years. Oh God, what's their name?
I know. Well, you got quite a tussle with the feds, didn't they?
Anyway, the
Big
feds
one.
come in and started confiscating their cattle because of non-payment. Well, the farmer who was, or the rancher who was feeding his cattle on the government land was paying the fee to the state and not to the federal government, which it should be. And so they had a showdown, and fortunately, people still had balls. So the Patriot movement went out there and forced the government to give back the cattle. Okay, and the ATF and the FBI and the CIA and the U.S. Marshals and National Security Council and any other government agency, land management, was quite upset because they were outnumbered and outgunned. How dare these upstart patriots do this to us? We are the most powerful means of law enforcement in the country. Okay. Now I can see what's going to happen here
So
in the near future. We got some real bad times coming, and if Trump don't get elected,
that's the way I feel. And you and I haven't talked about this, and we came up with the same conclusion.
I've got more on some of the things that the Democrats want to do, but we'll cover them. If we don't get it all covered tonight, that's fine. We'll save it for next week.
If you want to speak, Frank, I don't know what you're going to do. I turned that off because somebody was saying the sound was not so good. So turn it back on if you...
Don't be such a stick in the mud.
Yeah, we have a third fellow in here. Anyway, we have a third guy in here tonight. And
Bones. Bones.
Bones?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been trying to get him to get involved in this, and Mark Hornke, when he came down for Mike's funeral, talked to him and said, "You need to be stepping in because your grandfather's not going to always be here to carry the ball. So we need the younger generations to get in it, because the younger generations are the ones that are wanting to support socialism in this country." Okay.
Yeah, well, they've been indoctrinated with our tax dollars.
Yeah. Number two.
Not all of them.
Number two, a heavy, progressive, or gradual income tax. Where have we heard that before? The 16th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution in 1913, which some scholars maintain was never properly ratified, the various state income tax established this major Marxist coup in the United States many decades ago. Well, it's over 100 years ago now. These taxes continue to drain the lifeblood out of the American economy and greatly reduce the accumulation of desperately needed capital for future growth, business starts, job creations, and salary increases. Okay? Now, you ask, well, the government does need money to function. Okay, yes it does. The government needs money to pay for our defense. Yes it does. The government needs money to take care of the welfare. No, it don't. That's what charities and churches and religious organizations are supposed to be taking care of. The government is not supposed to be sticking their nose in it and, well, we can do it better. No, I have never seen a government program that can do it better than the private sector.
Yeah.
And what the government programs do is create a job for those who are too incompetent to work in private sector. Okay?
Or sometimes they want to just hide and get a nice paycheck.
Well, they sit there and they get a nice paycheck and don't do anything. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of good people working for government.
Yeah, that's the thing. There are some good people.
That are trying.
A lot of good
but
people.
they're being held back because of the others.
Yeah.
Okay?
The hiders.
Yeah. Which works into the socialist
Yeah.
socialist program or communist program. And I have when I get done with this, I think I'll go into that. I have a sermon that my minister did on socialism.
I was thinking about that the other night. You mentioned this. Real quick. I thought they can get in big trouble being taxed. They don't have to pay taxes, right? The church.
Not as of yet.
And part of that deal is they're not allowed to be political.
Yeah, see,
right?
They got the 501c3 status,
okay.
tax exempt status from the IRS, which means technically they're not allowed to speak out against the government.
Yeah.
Okay. Fortunately, when he was talking, he didn't mention any names. He just mentioned the
Principles.
the millennial generation, but he didn't call them that. It just goes into it.
Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay, I finished that. Now we all see. Now, according to what I have read, the income tax was originally set up for taxing businesses that did business overseas, or people who worked overseas and lived, or citizens who lived over there and worked overseas. The tax was basically voluntary for the citizen who lived inside the borders of the United States, or confines of the borders of the United States. But in 1943, that voluntary status was removed to mandatory, gosh, I'm drawing a blank, mandatory compliance. That now the private citizen had to contribute his fair share to fight the war effort. Okay? And so, again, we drain the economy, we drain the people's ability to support themselves, and then we create a system of where now it takes two members of a household to work in order to raise a family or have a decent wage, because at the present moment approximately 50% of the income of one goes out to pay taxes of all kinds. And years ago, Dianne Feinstein, the fine communist she is, come up with, if the American people are bitching now because they're paying 30 to 35%, or 35 to 45% on the taxes, wait till we get it up to 95%. Okay, that's their goal, to get 95% of your labor.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they can misappropriate it.
So they can get themselves rich and then turn around and give it to those that are too lazy to work. Okay.
Yeah.
Good example of the beginnings of socialism right there. So, this is not a problem that has come on recently. It's been growing for years. Number 3, abolition of all rights of inheritance. Okay, they haven't quite abolished it, but they have put heavy tax penalties on it, depending on how much you have coming. Another Marxist attack on private property rights is the form of federal and state estate taxes and other inheritance tax, which have abolished or at least greatly diluted the right of the private property owner to determine the disposition and distribution of their estate upon their death. Instead, government bureaucrats get their greedy hands involved. Okay, so when you die, I believe it's a $250,000 kick-in limit. If you die and have $250,000, I may be wrong on the percentages. I know the state of Pennsylvania wants 6%. Okay. So you're looking at $15,000 going to the state.
6%.
Yeah. The federal government, I don't think, kicks in on that until after it gets to be $250,001, and then they kick in, and I'm not sure what their percentage is. Okay, so then you get bing bing. Now the townships, before your death, has a capital gains tax, which the county, the townships have a capital gains. So if you invest money and your investments make money, then at the end of the year, you have to file a capital gains
These taxes can be very high too.
Yeah. Okay. So they're out there taking your money, and the part that gets me is we fought a revolution in this country because the King was taxing us at 10%.
Short-term capital gains tax is 30.
Yeah.
30.
30%. Okay.
Less than 300. You hold an investment of various sorts for 364 days, 11 hours and 59 minutes. You get taxed 30%.
Yeah. So if you got, so if you're making $500, they're getting $150 of it.
And they deserve it, don't they?
Yes, yes, they do. I mean, they keep our roads nice. They come up and they polish my shoes for me, wash my car.
Yeah.
You know,
They reinvest the money.
repair my house when it gets damaged. You know. Yeah.
Once again, I want to say this though: there's a lot of decent people working for the government, and I hope, if any of you are listening, I hope you know that we do appreciate your efforts and in your efforts to influence those working with you to do better every day and to work in the public trust. And I know you know, if you're a good person working in government, you know what that term is. And I don't want to come across as a guy who just hates government. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough line to draw where government should end in some ways, but I know government in a way, they're supposed to be working the public trust and in a small way to keep certain things working well. I mean, Daryl, how do you, Daryl, you don't support anarchy, do you?
No.
Yeah.
No. We have to have some form of government, but that's what our government was supposed to be set up for, a Republican form. That meant majority could not vote to take away your rights. Okay, that's what it boils down to. Republican form of government is not democratic. Okay.
Yeah.
If you go on a democratic principle of a government, 51% of the population or the people can vote to take away your rights. But under the Republican form of government, they cannot do that. Okay?
Yeah, pardon my ignorance here, but Republican form of government, is it Republican just because there's a constitution?
Well, no, because there was, let's call it republic, not Republican, republic. Okay? Rome, at times, had a republic. Okay? The Senate was set up to do the bidding before the emperor of stuff that was needed to be looked at or taken care of, you know, like defense of the empire. Other countries have done the same thing, but once you allow it to switch from being a republic to a democracy, that's the word I'm looking for, democracy.
Yeah.
That's when you lose. That's when you take it on your chin and start losing. Ask the Nazis, or ask the Germans in World War II. Ask the Soviets in the former Soviet Democratic People's Republic of Russia, or Soviet Union. So
Mob rules. Democracy is mob rule.
that's right.
Yeah. That's why I love the idea of writing up a document like the Constitution. And as long as that document is well written, which certainly appears to be, that's the bedrock. You can't violate that.
Yeah, that's what we accepted when we founded our country. Was after we got done fighting the British for our freedom. Before that we operated under the Articles of Confederation, which is incorporated in the Constitution, by the way. Just that the Constitution goes a little further in describing the rights of the people and the government, the setup of the government, the responsibilities of each branch, being the Congress, the judicial system, and the president. Okay, each one has certain responsibilities. Now, Congress is overstepping its bounds and getting into things it shouldn't. The judicial system is interfering with the president on things that he's trying to accomplish because Congress won't cooperate and take care of the things. And one of the things that is supposed to be taken care of by the federal government is the borders of the United States are to be secured.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
but yet Congress don't want to do that. There's so many ways we can go. But that just shows you how far we're drifting away from the Constitution, which I have a copy here. And
well, even common sense. I mean, we literally have an entire political party telling us, and then the entire media too, by the looks of it, supporting the idea that we shouldn't have borders.
Yeah.
That you should be able to just bring anyone across, and then of course that's going to lead to even more people that want to come across, because they know we're too dumb to stop them now.
You know, it's
right.
it's hypocritical because they're giving them all want to give them all driver's license. They want to register them to vote. They have no constitutional rights under the Constitution because they are not what? They are not citizens of the United States.
They're not legal citizens of the United States.
So they have no constitutional rights. The only rights they have is what we grant them in the name of humanity.
Yeah.
And that, but they should have no say in our government. They should not have the ability to drive to go elsewhere or travel, because once they get that driver's license, they disappear, and then who knows where they end up. And who knows what crimes they commit. And especially since the sanctuary cities are covering up the crimes that they're committing.
Yes, they are.
And
that Parkland shooter, remember him?
Yeah.
Because he was a Hispanic, they perceive him in their system. He had a Hispanic sounding name. Apparently there was a program that these wonderful, the parts of government that I don't really care for put into force, that basically, well, we just need to lay off of these kids that are not white, basically. That was the spirit of this. Mm-hmm. If his kid's Hispanic, stop punishing him for all the things he's doing. And he was cited many times for making I think violent statements, breaking various laws. I think there's a lot of signs there that they simply ignored just because he had that last name. I can't remember what it was, his Hispanic last name. He just slipped right through the cracks. And then he went and got a gun and shot up a school because of this silly law. I mean, I don't care what race you are, where you come from, you have to obey the basic rules we have.
I see here, I glanced over, and it says here that he was adopted by a Hispanic family.
Yeah. I remember something a little weird about Thanks, Paraclete. Sorry, I've been trying to keep an eye on the chat. Thanks for that's perfect. You looked at the chat. We need to keep these folks involved here too.
I'm trying to see what's going on. Okay. See, that was number 3.
Okay.
Number 4. Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. Okay. Mm-hmm. This was done in 1986. So if you were a patriot and you tried to fight the government, your property could be taken away from you, vis-a-vis the Bundys. Out there in
Clive Bundy and
we call it government seizure, tax liens, forfeiture, public law. It's 99-750, passed in 1986. So look it up. Don't take our word for it, but look it up. Executive Order 11490, Section 1205 and 2002, which gives private land to the Department of Urban Development, the imprisonment of terrorists and those who speak out or write against the government. 1997, the Crime Terrorist Bill, or the IRS confiscation of property without due process. See, right there. If you criticize the government or speak out against what the government's doing, they can come and seize your property. They can put you in jail because you criticize the government. So much for the First Amendment of the Constitution and freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm. Not that's under attack today.
Oh, well, yeah. We'll probably get to that in these 10, so. No comments? Is this all news to you? Is this all Greek to you? Do you need to read this after I'm done?
Maybe.
Well, I'll speak for myself when I say it takes years to get of living to learn some of this stuff.
Well,
at least that's the way it was for me.
Yeah.
I'll admit I went the wrong direction for a while. I did.
They want to know who is my co-host.
Oh, I answered that question once, but I'll say it again. Well, I'll just say it. My name's Jason. I've been in the chat room over the years, here and there. Yeah, you would just know me as Jason W. So yeah, I'm sitting in here. I helped Daryl. Daryl and I worked, tried to get this setup operating properly, and we've managed to. And Daryl asked that I'd be here to bounce some things off of tonight, so here I am. I'll admit though, I'm only able to be here till 7 tonight, so.
That means Bones has to get over there, and then.
Bones gonna be in chair number 2, I guess.
Yeah, he's gonna have to start speaking up instead of sitting there
Start talking.
at you. Yeah. Okay, let's see. That was number 4. Number 5, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of national banks with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. I just saw here recently, excuse me, I just saw here recently where the banks were given the power to seize your bank account upon bank crises.
Yeah, they call that a bail-in.
Yeah.
A bail-in.
Bail-in. Yeah.
Oh, we got a problem. Well, we got a simple solution. We'll take all the
all the deposits that
Yeah.
you got. Yeah.
You know, you ever think about why all those old folks that lived through the Depression kept money under their mattresses?
Perfect reason was because of the bank failures. They wouldn't get their money out.
They knew better than to trust a third party.
But they make it so convenient for you now. Well, we'll insure your account to $100,000.
Yeah.
Well, that's only going to last until the amount of loss exceeds the amount of money that the government has set aside to cover those losses.
Well, okay.
And that's only the first 100,000. That
Yeah.
does not include if you have more.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's one issue, but there's also the issue that the government is going to continue to print out all the money they need to conduct their business. $700,000 in play. There's been many times on this planet where $100,000 was a lot of money, and then a couple years later it would barely buy you a sandwich.
Yeah.
Okay. ask the Weimar Republic Germans, the Argentines.
Yeah.
Wheelbarrow of money just
yeah.
to buy a loaf of bread.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the same way with the communists in Russia with the nothing on the shelves to buy. Nothing on nothing on the shelves to buy, and the food was rationed, and you had to, whatever day it was your day to go get your meat ration, you had to be there, and if you weren't there to get it, it was gone. Okay.
I don't understand though. So they didn't have any land to grow food?
Well, they had lots of land to grow food.
Did they not have technology such as hoes to till the land?
Oh,
Or
they
seed?
had tractors.
Did they have seeds?
Yeah, they had seeds, they had tractors, but you see, the government incentive was taken away because the farmer would go out and bust his ass all day long in the field, okay, weeding, hoeing, and all that kind of stuff, and then at the end of the day or at the end of the week, he would get a small steppance of food, just barely enough to keep him alive so that he could go out and do it next year. Form of slavery. That's why each one, now the communist government had a heart. Each one was given a small portion of land by their house, okay, to cultivate, and whatever they sold from that, or produced from that, they could sell or use for their own purpose. They grew more food off the small plot of land per size or number of square feet than they did on the cooperative. Plus the fact, fact the tools were all marked CCC or
CCCP.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, but there they were.
CCP.
The people in factories were given a steppance for working in the factory. But if you exceeded your quota, which there were some hot dogs that did, they got a medal instead of a bonus or an extra steak thrown to them. They got a medal. Well, put your medal in a can of water and boil it and see how far that's going to nourish you.
Yeah.
So, but this is what happens when you go with the communist philosophy. And later, when I get to that's what I got setting up here So the Federal Reserve System created by the Federal Reserve Act of Congress in 1913. Again, another bad year for the same year as the other things that were passed. Is indeed such a national bank and its political municipality. Yeah. Okay. I know what I want to say, but it's not coming out. Randy, get your butt over here and say that word. Every so often I get a tongue twister from me, right there where my thumb is.
I've been there.
Manipulates?
Manipulates, yeah.
Yeah. See, now I'm not looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interest rates and holds a monopoly on legal counterfeiting in the United States.
Ooh, that's right in my alley. I study a lot of this.
Yeah. This is exactly what Marx had in mind and completely fulfills this plank. Another major socialist objective. Yet most Americans naively believe the U.S. of A is far from a Marxist or socialist nation. Now, let me explain something to you. When this Federal Reserve System was set up, the U.S. Treasury note.
The U.S. what?
U.S. Treasury note.
Treasury note,
Was
yes.
phased out for the Federal Reserve note.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that was the U.S. Treasury note was printed by the U.S. government at the time, Department of Treasury.
Mm-hmm.
When they passed this Federal Reserve Act, it went to a foreign entity, a non-American entity, called the Federal Reserve. It's made up of investors from big industry and foreign countries.
Probably the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's the German name.
Yeah.
Rothschild. It means red shield.
Yeah.
There's some great documentaries on them on YouTube, by the way, folks.
Yeah. So what they do, the way I've seen it lately is, here's how this works. The U.S. government no longer prints its money. We pay the Federal Reserve to print the money. We pay the Federal Reserve to borrow the money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we pay them interest. The interest on the money that we pay them comes from the taxes. But all the taxes that are collected by the federal government cannot keep up with the interest rate on the previous years. So all that tax money goes to the Federal Reserve, which leaves the government no money. So what do they have to do? They have to borrow the money to operate from the Federal Reserve and pay interest on it until they collect it at the end of the year and turn it over to the thing. So consequently, the government is working on borrowed money, and you pay the interest on that loan through the taxes. That's how it basically works. Real simplification.
But there's another way you're paying though, and a lot of people don't know this. If you don't mind me.
No, go ahead. That's the idea.
You're paying another hidden tax, and it's called losing your purchasing power. Mm-hmm. When they print more money, and more money goes into circulation, there's actually a way to check this on the Federal Reserve St. Louis's website. You go to that website and you can look up M2 money supply. If you look at the M2 money supply since 2008's financial crisis #1, or number recent, and we'll have another one soon, the money supply goes dramatically upwards. That is money in circulation. If you take the money in circulation and double it, prices will naturally double. Now, so that means if you had say 500 grand in the bank for retirement, you can now buy $250,000 worth of goods and services because they increase the money supply. They're printing money, they're counterfeiting money. When the government needs money, they just basically crank out more, and at the end of the day, they have to keep the inflation. It's called inflation. They have to keep prices from rising so fast that the public gets upset. They can't have the prices fall. They have to keep them going upwards. So that's why they keep cutting interest rates and printing out more money to keep the system working. But it's a hidden tax that most people don't know about, and that's the destruction of their purchasing power, which is the same as if you had a fixed amount of money and were being taxed out of it. You're losing purchasing power that way. But if you print out a lot more money and prices go up, and your wages will always trail that. So for every like 10% of decrease in purchasing power you have, the average worker will probably get a 2% raise. And that's what's happened to most people since the early 70s when we left the gold standard. Purchasing power has decreased dramatically, and surprise, surprise, the middle class's lifestyle and the infrastructure in this country and many other things has been falling apart since then. So since I was born, things have been doing this. They've been going down.
Now, that brings us to an event that happened while I was in high school back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the assassination of John F. Kennedy, President of the United States.
Yeah, this ties into
Okay. A lot of people tried to say, well, that was because of the failed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba, and the Cubans, Castro was retaliating against him for that. But that's not really the reason. If people remember, the generation that I think you can remember, there was a move by Kennedy to abolish the Federal Reserve Act and go back to the U.S. Treasury note. And that's why the first set of notes was the $5 bill, and I think it had the red seal on it. Okay? For going back to the U.S. Treasury.
Okay, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah. He was assassinated because he was doing away with that.
That's what I heard too, and I believe that 100%.
Okay? And, but of course, they'll never admit it because it was deep state.
Now, one more thing, note on that. I'm under the impression that was already signed into law, or like an executive order or something, and on the way back to Washington from Texas, the acting president, what was his name?
Johnson. LBJ.
Johnson signed it back out.
Laughing Bank Book Jr.
I mean, as far as I know, Kennedy's body wasn't even cold when that was being signed back out of law. And one other thing on the Federal Reserve, I don't know how many people know this, but it's the third bank in the United States. There was two other Federal Reserve style banks before that. They were shut down by the people. This is the third, so this is just the latest iteration of a central bank controlling money.
You see how the dumbing down works? We don't talk about in school or teach the people about the Federal Reserve. We don't teach them about the Communist Manifesto and what's going on in the country. We do teach them about communism, socialism being the way to go.
Equality.
Okay, equality. But anyway, moving on to the next one. We'll never get done here. This is what happens to Mike. It happened to us a lot of times.
Well, we're just trying to add some color to this, but yeah.
Centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. That little device you got right there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was it?
It's the centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. Okay?
Yeah.
In the U.S., communications and transportation are controlled and regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, commonly called the FCC. Established by the Communication Act of 1934 and the Department of Transportation and Interstate Commerce Commission, established by Congress in 1887, and the Federal Aviation Administration, as well as Executive Orders 11490 and 1099. Not to mention various state bureaucrats and bureaucracies and regulations. There is also the federal postal monopoly, Amtrak and Conrail. Now, we have seen the combination of railroads because supposedly they went bankrupt in the form of Amtrak and Conrail. And we have seen interstate commerce. Truckers have to pay a tax for their load, okay? In addition to the tax on their fuel for the use of the interstate highways. By the way, did you know the interstate highways were not built for the civilian use?
I've heard that,
It
yeah.
was actually built for the military to use in time of emergency. Now, getting to Amtrak and Conrail, I happen to know a little bit about that because my dad worked for the Erie-Lackawanna Railroad. And we had can't think of the name of the hurricane, but we had a hurricane come through and wash out some of the infrastructure of the railroad. So at the time, Conrail, which was headed by, down in Philadelphia, by executives of Penn Central, which really berserked me. Since the government set up the program, they didn't know anything about running the railroad. And what did they do when the Penn Central went bankrupt? The government hired the executives of Penn Central to run Conrail. Shows you how much thinking they have on their, or how much brains they have. If I had a board of executives that ran this company into the bankruptcy, I sure as hell wouldn't be hiring them to run something else. Okay? So,
Yeah.
once they set that up, Meadville, the Erie-Lackawanna Railroad went belly up, so it got taken over by Conrail. Now, the shortest route from Chicago to New York went through Meadville. It was also the midway point, 500 miles to New York, 500 miles to Chicago. Okay, but with Penn Central taking over, or Conrail taking over, the Meadville line was eventually stripped. Okay, we had big car shop, we had signal shop, and I don't know how many lanes of traffic going through, tracks going through here, but that was all stripped out. Now the main line of transportation is now, the two main lines are now up by Erie. The one that goes through Erie, and then goes down through Penn Central, down through southern part of Pennsylvania, and then up and around and through. Got to make a 100-mile detour down, go across, and do my 100 miles back up. Now Conrail was more of the passenger train and light freight. But they were also set up by this stuff, and every one of them for years and years and years had to have money from the government to operate. In other words, they were still running in the red, okay, because they had these executives that put them in there in the first place. Instead of the government firing all of them and say, here's your hat and coat, and if you need an umbrella, here, go find another job, and hire somebody that knew something. They didn't.
Yeah, I'm definitely not in favor of the government getting involved with private businesses like that. Yeah. Of course, the problem with that, aren't the railroads a little more complicated that way, though, because the infrastructure, you can't have 6 companies build 6 sets of tracks, right? So you get into that weird situation of sharing the rails somehow.
Part of the reason why the railroads fell under I turned it over, I gotta go back.
Yeah.
Okay. Part of the reason why the railroads were put under the FCC was during the 1800s, especially during the Civil War, almost every railroad had their own gauge for their tracks. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so one car built for one railroad would not fit on another track because the track was too narrow or too wide. Okay. And so they established a standardized gauge for the railroads. Okay, smart idea, good idea. But there again, dictation is by the government to the private enterprise. But it would end up making it so the railroads could be more efficient. But there again, I don't I don't believe in government interference in private enterprise, but that's what happened. Number 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state the bringing into cultivation of wasteland, and the improvement of soil generally in accordance with a common plan. Gee, sounds like the Soviets. They had their common plan. Okay. While the U.S. does not have vast collective farms, which failed so miserably in the Soviet Union, we nevertheless do have sufficient degree of government involvement in agriculture in the form of price supports, subsidies, and acreage allotments and land use controls. The Desert Entry Act and the Department of Agriculture, as well as the Department of Commerce and Labor, Department of the Interior, Environmental Protection Agency, the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Reclamation, Bureau of Mines, National Park Service, and the IRS control of businesses through corporate regulations. Yeah, the most obvious is for a while, and I know they still do. Farmers were paid not to grow corn years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
And I believe they are still being paid not to grow corn here, but because of ethanol, Brazil is cutting down the rainforest to grow corn. Okay. Which, if anybody knows anything about the environment, the rainforest provides something like 75% of the oxygen level in the world, and by cutting it, you're cutting the oxygen supply. And instead of instead of telling the farmers to go ahead and plant here, so that they don't cut down the rainforest to eventually suffocate the world. Okay, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just the law of unintended consequences. When the government gets involved like that, is
and then your Bureau or Department of Agriculture, okay, Environmental Protection Agency, okay,
EPA. Yeah.
EPA. At one time, I have a depression over here in my side of my property, and in the spring and in the fall when we get a lot of water, it gets soft and mushy. Under the watershed program, I was with the new law that they were trying to pass, I would not be able to use that acreage because of the depression, because it got wet in summer. In fact, my shop, if that was allowed to go through my building that I had my shop in, would have to have been moved because I would have been within their buffer zone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And this was being sponsored by the NRA. That's what caused my fallout with the NRA, sticking their nose into something that doesn't belong.
Yeah.
And, so,
well,
but
I don't know if are you doing a 1 hour break thing, or either way, I'm sorry, but I do have to get out of here.
Well, you go ahead and go. We're not going to take the break because we don't have any music set up, and I don't
Okay.
know.
Well,
Yeah.
folks, thanks a lot for having me on board, and it was good to spend some time, but unfortunately I have to go, and we'll see what happens down the road. Thanks a lot.
Okay, well, thanks, Steve.
Jason. Give me a hand. Randy, good to see you, buddy.
And if you
See you Tuesday.
if you want to do it again next Sunday,
Yeah,
we'll
We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
Don't forget that.
My tracking device.
Yeah,
Hey.
let them know where you're at.
Okay.
And that's so. Well, Randy is going out to move his car so Jason can get out. And I see here some chats for great to have you here, Jason. Stay frosty, Jason. And I do have a question for you since I am looking at the chat. I know we're not having the same frolicky roll that I did with Mike, but how are we doing? Are we doing okay? Hopefully as we get to know each other, we'll get more or less less serious. So if anybody out there wants to send me a note telling me whether we're doing good, bad, or indifferent. Would be appreciated. And we'll be continuing on here as soon as Randy gets back. In fact, I'll just go ahead and start because there is so much that needs to be done. Equal obligation to all work. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. We call it Social Security Administration and the Department of Labor. The national debt and inflation caused by the commercial banks has caused the need for two-income families. Remember what I was saying earlier? Women in the workplace since the 1920s, the 19th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, assorted socialist unions, affirmative action, and the Federal Public Works Program, and of course, Executive Order 11,000. And I almost forgot, the Equal Rights Amendment means that women should do all work that men do, including the military, and since passage, it would make women subject to the draft. Now, I believe in equal pay to the women for doing the same job as men as long as they can do that job. I do not believe in paying them to do that job if they're not capable of performing it. Whether it be a physical application or the natural ability of people, mechanical aptitude, that's fine. But I do not believe that women should be in the front lines of combat. It is, I know may sound sexist, and I don't mean to sound sexist, and if any of you out there I see here, great to have you in the captain's chair, Daryl. I occur, Tactical Jones. Amen. Thank you for the vote of confidence, and I hope that you will be able to spread the alarm that we are here. Did you bring any stogies with you?
Yeah, I did.
I'm gonna take a minute to fire up a stogie. Next week I'm gonna make sure I have something down here to drink because talking is making me dry. But now that Randy's gonna get behind the bike, no, I don't want anything. No, I don't want anything that's got sugar in it. A lot of sugar. I've been a bad boy.
We got no beer.
No, there's no
Do we
beer.
have any booze?
No. I do know Mr. T. I talked to him this week, and he had a prior engagement today, so because he didn't know how soon we would get back on the air, but he said that he will probably be here next week, which will help add some stuff to it. But Mr. Bones, just because he's coming, I don't want you to.
I'll be here.
And,
I won't be so quiet.
well, I hope not, because it gets awfully boring for just one person to do all the talking. Although the chat room is buzzing. And, New World Order of the Time broadcasts. Welcome if you got them. Glad to hear the bear has a cod, Mr. T. Okay. Just a second here, folks, so I can get my stub cut off here so I can fire up a smoke. And then we'll get back at it. I forgot what I was doing, too. Where I'm at on this. It's funny how all this stuff ties in with what's going on in the country and the thinking of our political leaders, especially the Democratic Party. All right. We toasted the foot. I didn't lick the outside, which I should have. But that's all right. torch is lit. Okay, thank you, folks. It says here, Daryl, just I'm glad you're back on the air. Amen. All right, thanks, folks. Okay, where'd my story? Oh, he took it.
I got hold of it right here.
Which, I was doing one when you went out. Which,
What are we on, number 9?
I think-
Combination of agriculture and manufacturing.
Yeah, okay. I know at one time labor unions were a necessary evil because too many of the people were have to work 10, 12 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week. And they do nothing more than go to work and then go home and go to bed and get up the next day and go to work and that. And working conditions were less than ideal. So, like I said, they were a necessary evil because those that owned the factories were more into the greed of profit rather than the maintaining the proper working conditions for their employees so that they would stay healthy and continue to produce. But when they started breaking up into job descriptions and they were asked to do something and it said, well, that's not my job, man. Now, I worked in a factory. I started out as a laborer, and my job was to go around and shovel out the machines, the chips and stuff, because the machinist was not allowed to do that. Okay. Then I put a bid on a job, and I got a gigantic board where it took 8 hours to make one cut. That's how big it was. Okay. But in the meantime, that one cut would put 2 or 3 feet of hot chips on the floor, and I was not allowed to take and shovel a path around the controls so that my shoes did not melt. I had to wear steel-toed shoes, and they were, at that time, they were about $55 a pair. And they would only last about 6 weeks because of the hot chips. But I was not allowed to do that. I had a light go out that shined on the controls, and I was not allowed to change that light bulb. I had to wait for 4 hours for an electrician to come over and change one light bulb. The machine had to be shut down until he got there. That kind of stuff. You know, I'm sorry. You should be able to do what you need to do to keep your job running to pay for make your wages. And if the light goes out, you still get paid regardless of what you're doing. Now, some people, they like that idea. Of course, we have that in every society. Me, I like to keep busy because that made the time go faster. So, anyhow, that's just a small sampling how the unions have overstepped their bounds. Benefits, yes, because if it wasn't for the unions, we wouldn't have holidays, medical pay, or not medical pay, but hospitalization, and some of the other things. And I know there's still people that have to pay part of the premiums for their insurance, but that's just because the companies can't afford the cost of the insurance these days, because a lot of the hospitals have to pay for the freebies that they have to give out to the welfare recipients or the people who do not have any insurance whatsoever. And that brings us to socialized medicine, and the first step in socialized medicine is Obamacare. And it will be getting worse if the Democrats get in there. Okay, that was number 9. All right, let's go to, I'm sorry, that was number 8. Nope, number 9, I'm sorry, I did that. All right, you got me confused, Randall, you shouldn't have taken it.
I've been talking too much.
Yeah. Free education for all children in government schools. Abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, and combination of education with industrial production, etc., and etc., and that. Now, let's get to the second one here. The abolition of children's factory labor. I agree with that. Okay, it's really the only requirement that the child should have is getting the education, so that he can read, write, and do mathematics. Okay, whether the government schools are good, bad, or indifferent. Okay, which is your public schools. There's too much interference by the government in the funding and saying, well, if we're going to give you X numbers of dollars, you have to put in this program. You have to teach this subject. But after 5 years, if you accept the money and put this in, after 5 years, you have to pay for it on your own, and you have to keep it. Which means my property tax goes up. Okay? In order to pay for the teachers that we have to pay for these useless subjects. And there's a lot of useless subjects. And then you got your education for college. They've got everybody brainwashed that you have to go to college. Now, not everybody is college material. And there is no reason why a person that goes to college should be saddled with a $200,000 debt. For when they get out of college, they're going to find a job that's not going to be able to pay them enough to ever pay that debt off. Okay? You go to school, you get a $200,000 degree, and what do? You flip hamburgers at McDonald's in order to have an income to live on, and then your student loan keeps piling up and piling up and piling up because of interest. Like I said, not everybody is college material. Trade schools, I believe in trade schools a lot, and that way a person can go into trade school. It's expensive, but it's nowhere near the cost of a college education, 4 years of college. I'm sorry, folks, my voice is starting to fail. But anyhow,
If I may interject, I know
get up closer to the mic.
several of my siblings have gone off to college, some out of state, some in state, and they've been saddled with so much debt that they're questioning now whether they can even begin to pay their bills to survive week to week, month to month, year to year, or even begin to pay that debt off and make substantial payments. Now, I made the decision after 4 years of high school. I realized, well, wow, college really wasn't for me. I wasn't going to go and study for another 4 years and be successful, so I decided to go to a trade school and get involved in a dyeing trade. I would say that, you know, the old man's right. Not everybody has to go to college, and I think that people don't have to push the going to college so much. I found that in high school, everybody, all the teachers, all the guidance staff, everybody pushed college so hard. And they'll host a college fair, and you'll have all these colleges come in, and they'll sit down, and they'll run you through the ringer and tell you, oh, college this, college that. But you'll be shocked to find how few trade schools are there, and how little respect people have for trade schools.
When I was running my gun shop, I went to a trade school, but it wasn't until my later years after I injured my back and tore up 5 discs in it in the lower back. I went to trade school and I got help from the state. Otherwise, I'd never been able to afford it. But I also had a family of 2 kids to take care of. When I graduated from trade school, gunsmithing school is what it was, I opened up my gun shop. And I was open 55 to 60 hours a week in the summer because I had that much work. And then in the winter, I'd be quite often be down there on Sunday afternoons trying to get caught up so that people would have their weapons back for hunting season. And then I'd throw in a few gun shows. So my average work week ended up being roughly 65 to 70 hours a week. And my profit, I didn't charge enough. That was my problem, my mistake. But my profit was, at the end of the year when I filed my income tax, I got a nice healthy income tax return. It worked out to being about 75 cents an hour wages. Okay? But I was able to raise the family up. The wife was working to help carry the balance. And now I don't have a pot to piss in because of certain circumstances. And that comes from being a patriot. Okay? I made decisions years ago that I was going to do whatever I could to preserve my country, and it did, according to their estimates, did violate a law. But there again, the reason for it was because you had no way to redress that law. Okay, they were not issuing permits. And somebody's talking about flying. Yeah, that'd be a good idea, especially if you got your own wings, don't have to use gas. Talk to Superman about that. Okay, we're talking about free education for grade schools. Now, there is a lot of problem with grade schools, and there is, especially in the inner cities. Now, I know there are people out there that they're going to say you're a racist, you're a hater, and you're in that. But the primary duty of a child, until he reaches the age of 17 or 18 or even 19 when he graduates from high school, is to go to that school and get whatever education is offered to them, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. The problem is, in the bigger cities, we have too many people that are not going to school that find it easier to stand on the street corner and sell drugs, prostitute their sisters and mothers, and go do drive-by shootings and kill each other off, and then blame it on whitey. Now, the reason they're oppressed is because they're doing it to themselves, not because of the white man. Because they are given the opportunity, they just won't take advantage of it. So, now I want you to know, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want you to know that the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto were read into the congressional record back, let's see if I can find it real quick, like. Well, don't have the date, but I believe it was back in the 50s. Okay, I have here some more planks of the Communist Manifesto, but I'm not going to.
Aren't there only 10?
No, there's more, but those are the top 10.
Ah.
Okay. You find there's 45 communist goals on the web in its original form, because in 1963 there was no digitized documents. You will find the website that have copied them as I have. So 1963 is when the digital thing come out, and let's see. Oh, that's this one here. Okay. So this is the one with the 45 goals. Now, let's see, we have 36 minutes to go. I would like to read to you, and I know I'm not going to have the same charm as the minister of my church, I hope this doesn't offend anybody out there who may not be of the Christian faith. And if it does, too bad. I have the constitutional right to offend the offendee, and if you want to come and talk to me about it, I'll be glad to discuss it with you. It'll only be one-sided, but I will be glad to discuss it with you. And, oh, by the way, I have coming in, I found a source of some inexpensive 2020 Trump's campaign flags that say "Make America Great Again." I have them coming in, and when I get there, I might decide to put them out there if anybody's interested in buying one as a donation to the station. I'll see how much it is, and then figure out how much it would cost to ship it, and then I'll tell you what size donation would get you one. I only got 10 coming, and if I don't sell them, I'll be taking them to the gun show too. But that's okay. Okay. The name of the sermon, Game of Thrones, Why Does It Matter? Protestant churches are losing young adults in sobering numbers. Not only the Protestant, but so are all the other denominations. A recent survey declared, an organization called Lifeway Research found that 7 in 10 young people between the ages of 24 and 30 who went to church regular in high school dropped out of the church by the age of 23. Another research outfit called the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life recently declared that for the first time in American history, Protestant Christians make up a minority of the U.S. population. You hear that? Minority. Recently as the 1990s, Protestants represented 60% of the population. Today they represent 48% of the population. One could make the statement that America seems to be losing its faith. And of that statement, perhaps we should ask, why does it matter? Why does it matter that nations lose its faith? Keep that thought in mind as we move on. Remember what we said about okay. Insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. For example, a woman named Donna was walking. Sorry, Donna, if there's a Donna out there listening, I'm not picking on you, just was walking to her therapist, was talking to her therapist about her boyfriend compulsive spending habits. Donna said on more than one occasion, I tell him all the time that if he doesn't stop his ridiculous overspending, I'm going to quit bailing him out. But does he listen to me? No. He just keeps spending and spending, and I have to keep giving him more and more money all the time just so he can pay his bills. Does that sound familiar? Donna and her boyfriend were caught in a vicious cycle of his overspending and her bailing him out. Was she insane? Probably not. But she was definitely doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. In an effort to help this poor woman, the therapist read her a poem by Portia Nelson entitled, There's a Hole in My Sidewalk. The poem is divided into 5 chapters, and it goes like this. Chapter 1. I walked down the sidewalk. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk, and I fell in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe that I am in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it's there. I still fall in. It's a habit now. My eyes are open and I know where I am. it is my fault, and I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street and there's a big hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. After Donna heard the poem, she smiled and said, I think I see what you mean. I keep falling in this very same hole. Maybe I need to walk down another street. Experience can be a wonderful teacher. We need to learn from our past mistakes so that we can avoid them in the future. In the words of early 20th century philosopher George Santayana, Santayana, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Interjection something here. If you erase history and don't remember what happened in history, you're going to repeat it. Right now we have a Congress critter who wants to run for president, who seems to have forgotten the genocide that was committed in the 19th century by several of the world leaders at that time, but yet he wants to do it in the form of an abortion. Those who cannot remember the past can to repeat it. Those words are certainly applicable to the nations of Israel and Judah in the Old Testament times. Allow me to give you a brief history lesson. God made a covenant with Abraham in the year 2000 BC. He was to become the father of a great nation. His son Isaac became the father of twin boys named Jacob and Esau. Jacob's name was later changed to Israel. Then he had 12 sons, and that's how the history of the 12 tribes of Israel began. In the time of famine, the 12 tribes of Israel were forced to enter the land of Egypt. They were ultimately enslaved and led out of Egypt by Moses around 1300 BC. Then when they received the Ten Commandments and God's promise to be their God as long as they remained faithful to his law, they became a nation governed by judges until they decided they wanted a king. Against his better judgment, God sent Samuel to anoint Saul as the first king of Israel. When David succeeded Saul around 1000 BC, they were the most powerful nation in the world because of David's faithfulness. God blessed them and promised to bless them forever. That seems to be, the United States seems to be the modern day Israel. And are we losing God's blessing because we are drifting away from him? And only time will tell. In 922 BC, however, Israel became a divided nation. Israel was in the north and its capital in a town called Samaria. Judah was in the south with its capital in a town called Jerusalem. Each nation had its own king, and many of them led their people away from the ways of God. That's what got them into trouble. In 732 BC, a man named O'Shea, sometimes spelled O''S''H''E''A, I kid you not, became king of Israel. It says in the second book of Kings, he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. While the king himself was not terribly godly, the Bible essentially holds him accountable for all the bad things that were occurring in the nation as well. What bad things were occurring in the nation? Professor A.B. Rhodes put it in a book called Mighty Acts of God. A class of wealthy traders emerged, many of whom were unscrupulous in their business practices. There was a great gap between the rich and the poor were at the mercy of the rich. It was time to flagrate idolatry, greedy, luxury, idleness, immorality, and lawlessness. In short, it was time not unlike the 20th century AD. Then, here's another long one. Shalmaneser. The king of Assyria invaded the nation of Israel, and in the year 721 BC, the nation of Israel fell. As it says in the second book of Kings, this occurred because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God. In other words, the people of Israel turned away from God, and God removed his protective band from them. Now you would think that the people in the nation of Judah to the south would have been paying attention to all this. You would think they would have taken note of what occurred just to the north of them and clung to God for all they were worth. But for some strange reason they did not. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. How about going and get me a glass of water?
You got it.
Ooh, I'm going to send Randall for a glass of water so I can moisten my voice. Let's see. In the year 997 BC, a man named Ezekiel became king over Judah. As it says in the second book of Chronicles, he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Are you starting to pick up a theme? Later in the second book of Chronicles, Arthur writes, the Lord sent prophets to them because he had compassion on his people, but they kept mocking the message of God, despising the words and scoffing at his prophets until wrath of God against his people became so great that there was no remedy. Shortly after, in the year 587 BC, the nation of Judah was conquered by the Babylonians. The Old Testament attributes the collapse of Israel and the fall of Judah to the wrath of God. The Apostle Paul explained what the wrath of God is in the first chapter of his book, Romans. In chapter 1 he writes, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against the ungodliness and wickedness of those who, by their wickedness, suppress the truth. Therefore God gave them up in the lust of their hearts, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie. Just a second, folks, I need to swallow. Okay, where was I? Okay. Therefore God gave them up in the lust of their hearts, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped the creature rather than the Creator. The Greek words translated wrath of God are orgi theo. This refers not to some hothead vengeance God plans to take out on his people, but rather the wrath of God implies that God simply gives people over to the folly of their sins. Perhaps C.S. Lewis put it the best in his book, Screw Tape Letters. He wrote, there are two kinds of people in the end, those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says, thy will be done. The wrath of God is not God lashing out at his people in vengeance. The wrath of God is simply God leaving people to their own devices. That, my friends, is exactly what the nation of Israel and Judah found in the end. Do you think you could read the rest of this?
Of course.
Okay. Give my voice a chance. Starting right there. And it's printed on both sides of the sheet. When you're done with that sheet, you turn it over.
Everything from there down, huh?
Yeah, well, and then the back of the other rest of it. Until I can get my voice back.
Oh, okay.
So you got about 2 pages.
So what does that got to do with us? There is no nation on earth that could withstand the military might of the United States of America. That's a given. We could probably hold even our own if the rest of the world had turned against us. Besides, we're against Kevin Dill, who himself a Canadian, has assured me that no matter what, Canada's got our back. Thus, in spite of our ever more godless society, in spite of our mocking the words of the prophets, in spite of our worshipping the creature rather than the Creator, we have nothing to fear from the wrath of God. Or do we? Is it possible for a nation to fall without a single shot being fired? At the time of this writing, our national debt stood at, and I'm not even going to attempt to say that number, but it's too damn high. Too damn high all around. Each taxpayer's portion comes out to about $182,902. Total U.S. debt stands at an unbelievable amount of fucking money. Total debt per family comes out to $701,180. I ask you again, is it possible for a nation to fall without a single shot being fired? And all the while, our nation is engaged in political gridlock as both sides propose what they believe to be the ideal solution. Mind you, my goal here is not to be political. My goal here is to be prophetic. Thus, in mentioning any political party by name, allow me to tell you a couple of intriguing stories. Listen closely. An urban legend speaks of an economic professor at Texas Tech who tells us a story of how he once failed an entire class. Something I think we've all done at one time or another. The class insisted that socialism worked, and that no one would be poor and no one would be rich. Socialism was the perfect equalizer. Little do you know, comrade, I am more equal than you. So the professor conducted an experiment in the class on socialism. All the test scores would be averaged so that everybody would receive the same grade. After the first test, the grades were averaged, and everybody got a B. The students who hadn't studied were elated. The students that had studied were not, and thus the second test rolled around, and the students that had studied a little bit studied even less. And the students who had studied hard decided that they wanted a free ride too, and the average score of the second test was a D. By the time the third test came, no one was studying at all. And the class average was an F. No one was studying for anyone else. Bickering, blaming, name-calling, it all emerged. The experiment in socialism failed because when the reward was taken away, no one was willing to try to succeed. So much for the socialism as a remedy for our economic woes. On the other hand, I have a friend who runs a tool shop. He recently interviewed a man for a job. He said to the man, "You seem perfect for the job. When can you start?" To which the man replied, "Well, my unemployment doesn't run out for another 6 months, so I'd kind of like to wait out until then." Ah, some people are simply conditioned to not want to work. Even when jobs do trickle down. But when such jobs' benefits are taken... Well, holy shit, hold on. Even when jobs do trickle down. But when such government benefits are taken away, a friend of mine with 40 years of experience in the probation office assures me crime greatly increases. Our nation seems to be at an impasse, and political solutions are not entirely convincing. Add to the fact that David Myers, a professor of psychology at Hope College in Holland, Michigan, believes that, as a nation, we're growing more unhappy and depressed. He writes, "Today's youth and young adults have grown up with much more affluence, slightly less overall happiness, and greater risk of depression, and tripled teen suicide rate. Never before has a culture experienced such physical comfort combined with such psychological misery. Never before have we been so free, or had our prisons so overstuffed. Never before have we been so sophisticated about pleasure, or so likely to suffer from broken relationships. Could it be that when we have it so much, could it be that what we have is not so much a political problem as if it is a God problem? Maybe the only one who can keep us from suffering the fate that befell Israel and Judah is God. Maybe the only one that can solve the problems we seem to have is God. Yet all the while, and in ever-increasing numbers, Americans are turning their backs on God and trying to go at it alone. When will we learn to remember the past that we shall not repeat? When changes swirl and anxiety looms, our temptation is to look for a comforting path and to turn to God and say, God, what are we supposed to do? But maybe that's the wrong question. Perhaps the question should really be, God, who do you want us to be? Perhaps the question, repeating myself, forgive me, because in the end, history reveals that faith in God matters. It matters a great deal. Amen.
Amen.
That wraps that up.
I see from the chat that that stirred some stuff up. I'm glad to see that. I have to take my glasses off to be able to read the stuff on the computer, the chat room and that. So, but yeah, I'm glad to see that it stirred some stuff up and people were paying attention. And hopefully we weren't too boring. And now for a little something to do with, since we talked about the Communist Manifesto, let's see here. I want to do the Declaration of Independence, and I gotta find it. I think it's in the back. Let's see. I'm sorry, folks, I should have had this out. Come on. Appendix, the Declaration of Independence. This is quite long, so I guess we only have about 13 minutes, so I will skip that. And give you some important dates concerning our history and the founding of our country. And next week we will definitely get into doing some of the Declaration of Independence, and then after that we will try and appropriate some time for each show to the Constitution of the United States. All right. Some important dates in the history of our country. May 25th, 1787. The Constitutional Convention opens with a quorum of 7 states in Philadelphia to discuss revising the Articles of Confederation. Eventually, all states but Rhode Island are represented. September 1787. All 12 state delegates approved the Constitution. 39 delegates signed it of the 42 present, and the Constitution, or the Convention, formally adjourned. Yeah, maybe I'll need my glasses to read these. June 21st, 1788. The Constitution becomes effective for the ratifying states when New Hampshire is the 9th state to ratify it. See, it took at least 2/3 majority for the Constitution to be, or 3/4 of majority for the states to ratify it. March 4th, 1789, the first Congress under the Constitution convenes in New York City. April 30th, 1789, George Washington is inaugurated as the first president of the United States. June 8th, 1789, James Madison introduced proposed Bill of Rights to the House of Representatives. September 24th, 1789, Congress establishes the Supreme Court, 13 district courts, 3 ad hoc circuit courts, and the position of Attorney General. September 25th, 1789, Congress approves 12 amendments and sends them to the state for ratification. February 2nd, 1790, Supreme Court convenes for the first time after an unsuccessful attempt in February. December the 15th, 1791, Virginia ratifies the Bill of Rights, and 10 of the 12 proposed amendments become part of the U.S. Constitution. Now, since then, in the 200 and some years of our country, there's only been 27 amendments. Well, actually, there was one other one. It's called the original 13th Amendment that supposedly did not get ratified. And the reason they say it didn't get ratified because it didn't get back from Maryland to the capital, I think was Philadelphia at the time. Okay. And that one forbid lawyers from running for political office.
Oh Lord.
Now you see why supposedly didn't get put through. So anyhow, that is the basis, the history of our bringing in revolution to the establishment of the Congress, the government, the Bill of Rights, and all those equal steps. And now today they want to do away with the Constitution. That's what this new move, of course I haven't heard anything for a while, new move to establish a constitutional convention, because we want to add a few things to the thing, we want to take a few things, change a few things. If you want to make a change, there's a way to do it without the Constitutional Convention, and that is propose your bill, put it through Congress. It's called an amendment to the Constitution. Once Congress approves it, then send it to the states and let the states vote on it. And if it gets approved, not by the state legislatures, but by the people, then it becomes a constitutional amendment. And the biggest problem that they have with the Second Amendment is because it's in the first 10 amendments. Those first 10 amendments are not amendable. Well, I see the Dems are taking it on the head there. You got anything you want to say there, Bones?
Not that I can think of.
We have 7 minutes left, so that's it. I thought I brought more down here than that. Oh, there's some over there. Let's see if I can. Come on. All right, here's one for you. Worn into politics, since it is about current attempts to take away your constitutional right. Dems pursuing gun confiscation, too delusional to be president. Every Democrat running for party's 2020 presidential nomination is pursuing some sort of gun control. One hopeful representative, Eric Swalwell of California, Swallowedwell? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Threatened a Twitter user by criticizing his proposal to buy back weapons from the Americans and criminally prosecuting those who refuse to cooperate. Swalwell reasoned that any conflict between the government and gun owners would be short because the government has nukes. Yeah, you're gonna nuke your whole country just because somebody kept their gun. What a mental midget. We want him, or Democrats want him as president?
We've talked about this before on the show, I think.
Well, we've talked different things, but we haven't gotten, it's just continuation, and we have to keep people informed that it's continuing, because you don't see it on the red stream. I mean, the comments news, I mean, the controlled media. Democrat candidates should take a lesson from New Zealand. Contends the Second Amendment Citizens Committee for the Rights to Keep and Bear Arms. In response to Christchurch mass shooting, the New Zealand government adopted a ban on semi-automatic weapons and ordered residents to turn them in. CCRKBA Chairman Alan Gottlieb said the lesson that Democrats need to learn is that while people might be ordered to turn in their weapons, most will not comply. So far, however, only 700 firearms have been turned in New Zealand authorities, among an estimated 1.5 million in country. Big success. Yeah. From poll leader Joe Biden down to the last place Washington Governor Jay Inslee said every Democrat running has offered some degree of gun control to include bans on many semi-automatic rifles, but New Zealanders who did not enjoy a Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms in their Constitution are balking at the notion of turning in their firearms. Here in the United States, he said, we have the Second Amendment as a cornerstone of our Bill of Rights. Anybody who seriously believes that citizens will line up to just hand over their guns may be too delusional to be president. You can't say anything more than that.
Delusional.
So anyway, with the election coming up, you want to spread the word. And those of you who were listening tonight, if you will, spread the word that we are back on the air. We are a feeble attempt, but nonetheless we are there, are here, and will be here, as far as I can tell, every Sunday night, unless something major comes. There will be one Sunday coming up, and I probably won't be here, and that is the Sunday after Thanksgiving, because I will be at the undisclosed location hunting deer. I was reading the chat room, there was somebody there asking what I was auctioning off. I'm not really auctioning off anything. I have 10 Trump flags coming in for 2020 Make America Great. When they get here, I will hold one up so you can see it, and then I'll put a price tag on it, plus probably another $5 for the shipping. And if anybody wants to send me a donation to help fund the station, I will be glad to send those flags. And if they go over big and the source that I have that has them doesn't run out, I will continue to get them until they don't sell. And whatever doesn't sell here, I can always sell at the gun shop. So, if you're at all interested, watch. Probably next week I'll have that all figured out. So, it is 7:59. We don't have any music yet. That's one thing we haven't been able to get done. So, we'll keep working at it until we get things working out. Yeah, I agree with you. Raise the glass to our fallen comrades. I don't have anything here to raise it. We're not necessarily dry, but we just haven't gotten that far. So, on that note, folks, I have no bumper music to say goodnight with or close with. So we're just going to go ahead and close. I want to thank those who were tuned in. I want to thank you for tuning in. Spread the word so we get more people listening. I know it's Sunday night, and that's a lot of people are football crazy. And I have to admit, I am going up to watch the Steeler game, but basically, I used to be an avid football fan. If there was 3 games on Sunday, I watched 3 games on Sunday, and then I watched Monday night, and then I watched Thursday night. But since the Black Lives Matter movement has taken over the players, the poor oppressed players who are making millions of dollars have to kneel in protest to our national anthem, I have lost a lot of interest. And to Mike. Cannabis says he'll be back. Adios till next week. Keep praying. And my longest man crush. Whatever you say, Bob. Okay, folks. Thanks again. And now I'm going to start shutting things down and resume our other broadcasting. So the first thing to go is, where are you? Live dashboard. We need to. All right, where is it? We need to push that.